right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor. I have my co-host, Jaden here. Yee! And former guest, Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And we're continuing our October Spooktacular. We're talking about Hereditary today, directed by Ari Aster. And this is one I think we've been really excited to talk about Ari Aster. We have Hereditary, and then we're going to do another podcast on Midsummer. I love this director. I'm so excited to, because this came out in 2018. Midsummer was 2019. I can't wait to see more stuff that he puts out. I love his films.
Yeah, I love how he's like, we talked about a little bit off when we were starting this up about his interviews, how he's just a giant film nerd, and I love listening to him for those reasons.
Yeah, no, he's a little awkward, I think, in his interviews, but I love how he's so like attention to detail. I think Toni Collette, who's like the main character in this, she talks about he's the most prepared director he's ever worked with, and he essentially had the whole film planned out, 2 years in advance. Like, this guy, and all of that shows up in this film because everything is so purposeful and everything feels like it's. We talked about Denis Villeneuve being kind of an auteur in a way. I think Ari Aster is like more the definition of an auteur. Like,
absolutely, to a T.
Yeah, everything is absolutely his vision.
It's his story.
Yeah.
It's his aesthetic. It's his characters. From top to bottom, he controls everything in a way.
Seems like he typically picks very good actors as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the casting is amazing in both.
Which is interesting that you say that, because I've seen some of his student films, Munchausen and The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. Have either of you seen those?
No.
So Munchausen is about a woman who poisons her son as he's leaving for college because she doesn't want him to leave.
Oh, so basically that Pixar short.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
With the little doughboy thing?
Yeah. Bao.
Bao. Yeah. Oh, that's one of my favorites. I think I refer to that one in our Up podcast. That's one of my favorite Pixar shorts. I like how we're starting this horribly depressing movie with referencing a nice Pixar short.
Yeah. But then the other one is The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, and it's the story of this son getting married, and on the wedding day, you find out that the son and the father actually have an incestuous relationship, and that the son has been raping the father for like 10, 15 years. Yeah. So this is I think Hereditary is like, he's so concerned with family dramas, and he has been for a long time, and then he finally hits this home run with Hereditary,
because this is his first feature film.
Yep.
What a great way to debut. This had a budget. It had 10 million, which I think there's a lot of stuff coming out, especially all the A24 stuff we keep going over. It all has these like small budgets, and they all seem to have really good return. Like, this had a box office of 80 million. Yeah, it did well.
Yeah, make good movie, low budget, high profits, dude. And they're finding a really good business model here.
Yeah,
which is kind of a thing with like movies in general, especially like kind of your up and coming directors. They seem to do a horror movie. That's kind of a thing that exists because they're usually like cheaper to make.
Yeah,
and then if you get something good out of it, then they'll move on and kind of do something more of what they want to do. What I think is different about this is Ari Aster wrote this, and he wrote Midsummer as well, and both of those movies, they have a very personal feel to them. Like, this is something he's experienced, and he's just translating it into a script and then translating it to film in a way that's like interesting for people to go watch.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, the film feels very personal. It's not just like, okay, I just need to do a horror movie to kind of like get my portfolio out there, and then I can do stuff I really want to do. This seems like something he really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It definitely has that feel to me. So we've kind of rambled a bit. Jaden, what's your first impression of this film?
It is freaky as fuck, dude. I actually took a couple of tries to get through this movie because I don't do well with like super like movies make me super uncomfortable. This is one of those. It's very good. I love this movie. But yeah, the first time I watched it, I had to turn it off right away. Pretty quick into the movie, I was like, I can't handle this right now.
Yeah. It's tough.
It's a tough watch. But I mean, I would recommend this movie to anybody.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. Calvin, what do you think of this one?
So I'd say Hereditary is one of those films that falls into the genre of horror, only really because it has scary and supernatural elements. But at its core, it's a story of family tragedy. It owes more to the melodrama than any horror film. But it's Toni Collette's performance. Like, this film suffocates the viewer with grief and stages the drama of a family being pulled apart at the seams by these dark outer forces. And I think the success of its horror is how well they hide these sinister forces until they literally descend upon the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we've been doing more and more podcasts, and I'm watching a lot of movies, and I think the ones I'm connecting with the most is like the family drama. Like those stories always speak a lot to me, and I think you could remove the horror elements from this movie entirely, and I would still find this movie totally captivating. I love the family drama in this. It captures me entirely, and again, I think, like I said, that speaks to kind of the personal feel that Ari Aster brings to this. Like, it feels like a real story. It feels like something like grief that he's dealt with in his life, and he translated that to film, and I totally connect with all that. I just am so thankful that there are more and more movies coming out now that are horror, and they don't rely on the jump scare to make you feel frightened. This is just frightening because of the atmosphere of it, the feel of it. And there are things in it that are like the paranormal elements to it that do make it scary as well. But I just think there's just such a tense feeling, such a horror vibe to this that it doesn't rely on a jump scare. And I'm so thankful for that. I love that we are reviewing movies that don't rely on that trope to make them successful. Another thing, Calvin brought up, Toni Collette is amazing in this.
Yeah, she's fucking wonderful. It's like one of the best performances I've seen.
But apparently not Oscar worthy.
Dude,
not
okay.
even nomination worthy.
Okay, I do not give a fuck about Oscars or any of that stuff. It's all bullshit. It's all bought by production companies.
I usually don't care either. I'm just saying, how can you watch this and not nominate her? Margot Robbie got nominated for I, Tonya, which I think is a bad movie.
Yeah.
And she does an accent in it. And she got a nomination, and Toni Collette got nothing.
It's Margot Robbie. That's why.
I just think it's crazy. Frances McDormand ended up winning it that year for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Yeah.
Which is a fantastic movie, well deserved. But how does Toni Collette not get nominated?
Yeah, it's just it's the range of emotions. When you can bring that type of personal expression to a film and have it so believable, like those, I connect with all of the elements of that character. How can you not say that that's one of the best performances? Because it's so easy to be melodramatic the moment you're screaming.
Yeah,
you know? I know we haven't covered it yet, but 1984's Dune, the Baron Harkonnen's just literally screaming the whole time. That's not acting, man.
Yeah.
It's not believable.
Yeah, I think that the problem is because this falls into the horror genre, it's just immediately
cast off.
Yeah, it's okay, not a real movie. But again, that's why I love this movie so much. If you remove the horror element from it and it's just a family drama, this is absolute Oscar bait. This is, how could you not look at this movie and nominate it for everything? It's because there's a paranormal element put into it, and so it didn't get awards. And I agree with you, Jaden. I don't care much about awards either, because if you snub Toni Collette
then it
in 2018, then your award show sucks.
Yeah, literally listen to the good actors and stuff, they usually just don't give a shit about it. It's just hey man, we get it, these people are buying these things, that's what's happening right now.
Right. It's just a pat on the back. It's the same sort of thing we say with Robert Eggers and his attitude in interviews. Some people are saying this is a slow burn. I didn't say it.
Yeah, I love his interviews, his attitude towards film. But if we ever do when it gets to award season, we do a podcast on that stuff, I think it'll mostly just be to bash it. This is such nonsense.
Yeah, here are all of the films that we think are better. Especially
if Wham doesn't win anything,
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's world cinema is just forgotten, which is the big reason why I find, most people find the Cannes Film Festival to be the gold standard of what was actually the best film of the year.
The Cannes Film Festival?
Yeah, CANNES.
Yeah.
I can't remember what country it's in right now. I want to say that's French though.
I trust you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
So now that we've gotten our first impressions out, do we want to move into the look of the film?
Yeah, the aesthetic here is so interesting.
It's crazy, dude. It's because it's not steady throughout the film for the most part, because there's a lot of brightness to it in some parts, but then the dark parts of it are just so freaky and chilling, and it just really gets me involved in the film. I cannot take my eyes off of it because of how good it looks.
And that's what's so crazy too is you can't take your eyes off of it. It is incredibly slow moving.
Yeah,
the shot
and disturbing. It's
what I mean is you don't even notice that a lot of these shots. Some of them are over 2 minutes long.
Yeah,
and I wonder how much you notice that, how long these takes are.
Yeah, you guys have heard me harp on it, and I bring it up, I feel like every podcast. I refer to Hereditary so much in terms of this is what I like to see in a movie, long takes, give me a wide shot. Let your actors just like let them deliver some dialogue. No cutting back and forth between, you know, camera one, camera two, having close-ups on someone else. I love this film, and I love how he composes all of his shots. Everything is so interesting, and so it doesn't matter to me that these are long takes and that these scenes seemingly to have nothing happen. It's just I'm so interested in everything I'm seeing. And part of why I think that works so well in this film is the whole interior of the house is built on a soundstage. So it's not like an actual house, which it matters because you get shots that you couldn't just film in a home. It's not.
Oh, absolutely. Especially like when they're going into the model and then all of a sudden it's the actual house.
Mm-hmm.
Those shots are amazing. Like I was like, how did you do that? That's freaking wild to me.
Yeah, and there's like especially when it concerns the dinner table, you can't get the camera far back enough to get a wide enough shot there. So that's why you need the soundstage. You need to be able to move that to take that wall down.
Yeah.
And which is so cool. But I love the pacing here, like especially I think the perfect example of this all of the elements you were talking about, Connor, is when Annie is leaving Joel's the craft store and she sees Joan in the parking lot. Like that shot lasts a good 3 minutes, but you don't feel it because of how the camera moves. Like we see Annie come out, it pans with her as she comes to the parking lot and sees Joan. Then we follow her and Joan to her car, and here the camera is stationary for the rest of the shot. But we don't notice that because we still haven't cut because the subject is so engrossing. Now Joan is going on about her seance and all of these things. We really don't even see Annie's face, but it's all our curiosity here is of the morbid sort because of genre expectations. So it's just an excellent bit of filmmaking.
Yeah, no, I can't gush enough about just how everything looks and how it's not overly edited. Just the amount of time you get to breathe in every scene, and you get to like I said, this guy Ari Aster, goddamn does he know how to make a film. It just everything about it, everything you're seeing is wonderful, and I love the time it takes on every scene, and it doesn't like I think Jaden said it's kind of the way it's paced out. You kind of don't even like realize that. I mean, this movie is like 2 hours long. I don't even think it feels that long at all.
No, it doesn't, which is crazy because like a lot of movies like this, like I feel like where our commute scenes can be drawn out and stuff like that. Not one scene in here feels drawn out. Like
no.
there's one like after the beheading car scene, that takes forever. Like that scene after that, but like it takes forever to make you feel uncomfortable, and like it hits the nail right on the head with that. Like it wasn't like oh, I wasn't like sitting like, oh my god, like can this end? I'm like, this is fucking torture for like this character and me at the same time. Like I'm like in his shoes, I feel like right now. Like this is awfully brilliant. Like I don't know how else to describe that. Like
yeah.
We're talking about like kind of the length and hanging on these shots for so long. Alex Wolff, the kid who plays Peter, he said that they filmed enough stuff that this would have been like pushing over 3 hours if they just kind of included everything. And most of what got cut is the family drama stuff. So I would be interested to see that just because, like I said, I love that kind of thing. But the fact that there's somewhere exists a 3 hour version of this film, I would be interested to watch that.
I don't know if I can handle all that.
I just love his framing and his composition of shots. I can't get over how much I like him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and speaking of like composition, I love some of the techniques that he continues to use. Like he loves using mirrors in his images. I love setting up a mirror in a shot because it's an extra visual element of the. Sometimes it's describing like reflections of inner mind states, and I think those are the ones that happened here. Like Peter driving, you have all of the rear view ones. You have Peter in class seeing the rear view kind of just come down like in his mind's eye in the desk. That is unsettling.
Yes, very. The mirrors were used very well in this and Midsummer. Both are just like huge.
Yep. And then Peter sees the reflection in himself in it's like a cabinet with like a glass window on it. It's him like smiling really creepy.
Yeah. And also like during Annie's grief writhing scene, there's a mirror right there. So you see her undulating in the mirror as well. And it's just, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just so many different things going on as the camera slowly dollies out, and we see the window in the background, and Steve is holding her, and it's just a wide a wide shot. So normally those shots are treated like with brevity and lightheartedness when you get something that far out, but it feels so much worse than a close-up.
Brevity and lightheartedness might be the exact opposite way I would describe this film.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like why he's such a good filmmaker. Is he takes a camera angle that would be that defies the convention of what it normally says, and it's the most potent form of emotion that doesn't belong in that type of shot. It's just crazy to me.
You had a note about like kind of the upside down camera work here.
Just the one. It's only because it's something represented again in Midsommar. But when she runs through the hallway to go through her mom's stuff after finding Joan isn't home, the camera is up on the ceiling, and then she runs past it, and then it just flips and follows her, and it's upside down now.
You know, I again, it's just
it's fun.
He does a lot of fun things.
When she wakes up Peter. And the camera twists.
Yeah, that's frightening. Yeah.
Just a little. It's not even like a 90-degree tilt. It's close to it, but it's so cool. It's like, not a shot that you normally do.
It's like everything awful about a Dutch angle and turning it into something like that fits the film. It's like uncomfortable, and then you snap back into like, okay, because those kind of follow like a dream sequence and stuff like that. Or like
it was the dream sequence. Then she wakes up. Does the shot of like her behind the door, performing the seance because we hear her muttering, and then she realizes, oh, okay, look, we can all do this now.
Yeah. So I like the camera kind of it's being off because kind of the scene you just it follows was a little bit off, and then it snaps back into like the reality, like you're back in like the actual like film now, like you're out of the dream or you're out of like a vision or something like that. I love that because I hate Dutch angles, but this is like I wouldn't really call it a Dutch angle, but it's starting out of, something you wouldn't expect and then snapping back into it. I love that. I think it's great.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is focus. Focus is one of my favorite things to play with, and the horror genre loves it as well. But most of the time, it's like a novelty or a cheap trick. Like here, Aster's using it to isolate perspectives, like to draw your attention and to disorient. They're more than just the typical camera techniques that you find in horror, where we're just trying to make the audience uncomfortable. Like that's the whole purpose. But these work in so many other ways that you would find in dramas as well. I think one of the best examples of this is when Charlie is in school at her desk. We don't see the teacher. We don't see any of the other classmates because the depth of field is so shallow that the only thing in focus is Charlie and her desk. And then the pigeon flies into the window, and it's a jump scare, but it wasn't necessarily the intent, because that shot was meant to get you in Charlie's mind, and then it's just a nice novelty jump scare on top of it. So it doesn't feel cheap like it would in any other horror movie.
Yeah, I like the way you put that because, like I started this out, I was saying, like, thank God there's movies coming out that aren't revolved around jump scares to get you scared. If I had to kind of nitpick this movie, that would be the one kind of jump scare. I like the way you put it, how you're supposed to be getting into the mind of Charlie, and then when the bird hits, it kind of snaps you out of it. I do think it's a little jump scary, but it works in this where I don't think it works in like Conjuring, because those movies are built around the jump scare. This one uses it in
literally like that's all they're like, hey, here's where you think it's gonna happen. Yeah. Oh, wait 12 seconds and then it will.
Like that one, this movie does it in a much more clever way than those films do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's another element where it's not jump scare, not necessarily right away, but when Peter first gets up in the attic after Annie has chased him, and the focus is just on him, on the back of his head, and like normally I don't love people like I just gonna slowly turn for dramatic effect, but like you feel like, oh, don't turn your head, man.
Yeah.
You know something fucked up is in here.
Peter does that like 2 or 3 times in this movie, the slow turn, and like it somehow it works in this because it's like. It's a trope, I guess, in horror films, but it's like I am as scared as he is going into it, where I think in other movies it's like, okay, turn around so I can see the thing.
Yeah. No, this one, like one thing like with his mom up in the corner.
That's another one I want to talk about in terms of like focus.
Yeah.
Because this film, I think, does, I would say like quote unquote jump scares in a way that it's like you kind of jump scare yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, she's in the corner, like, and you're like, oh crap,
fuck,
like,
yeah.
So it's like it's a really clever way to do it.
Where, how long has she been there? Like, did I notice this right away? What's going on? And then like, it's very creepy because like it just stays there too. Like none of it. It's just a lingering effect. terrifyingness. I guess I'm gonna put that.
Yeah.
But,
I like that scene a lot. So I saw this in theaters. I was and I think about that scene, noticing her in the corner, and then I was like, oh, I can't wait for this to come out because I need to rewatch that and be like, how long was she there? Because I noticed it. Did I notice it really late? Did I notice it early? And that's what I think. It's like you've scared yourself by noticing what's going on in the frame. And he's such a clever filmmaker. Like it's so good. And it's using focus and keeping her fuzzy in the background and keeping the focus on Peter. And so then it's like once you kind of, because these shots take a long time and you get to explore them instead of it just cutting around all the time.
Yeah.
And then when you finally realize what's happened, you're like, oh man, like I'm freaked out now.
Yeah. And all of that, like those elements is like what makes me feel like this is the most terrifying movie that I've ever seen in my life. Like
when Annie goes up to the attic after the funeral and he's going through her mom's stuff.
Yeah.
And then you see Ellen in the corner.
Yeah.
Like nothing happens.
Nothing. Dude,
and that is
so there. Nothing's
my.
explained. It's just, and it's so creepy.
Yeah.
You know what I love about that now that you guys have mentioned it and what I just said about kind of scaring yourself?
I'm getting goosebumps right now,
Yeah,
actually.
me too.
Annie says that when she sees her mom and she goes back into the bedroom and she's like, oh, I scared myself.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel watching this movie. It's like, oh, I scared myself watching this.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I love, that just came to me just now. I love that it's sort of like kind of a reference to how I feel watching this movie, and to like have that in the film, I think is awesome.
Yeah. So, and then on the other end of these very shallow depth of field shots, you have this entirely other type of shot, these dioramas, all of the miniatures, and it's all flat. Like we change from these individual expressions to like full family. And the idea of the dollhouse aesthetic, or these the miniatures, the dioramas, whatever you want to call them, is such an interesting convention. And the first shot to set up the entire film, we've talked about before, the first shot being allegories for the rest of the film. I think that's so interesting because the first shot is an amazing achievement in terms of exposition and like the technical fun of it. Like we start with the treehouse centered in the window frame, then we dolly zoom out. It's because, you know, if you notice it stays centered. Like whatever they're doing right there, they're messing. It's not just a dolly out because the treehouse stays in such a way that they're also playing with focus. But so we come out of there, centered in the frame, and then we pan over to the house model and then slowly dolly in on Peter's room. So we start with where the film ends and are shown how the characters exist in this dollhouse environment. And if you think of the coven as being represented by the treehouse, then they've always been on the periphery watching the pawns in their little fabricated world.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Isn't that, and that is just, and then that's further represented, not just in the miniatures, but the way they set up certain scenes. You know,
right.
The one that I think of the most is obviously a lot of shots in Peter's room, but also the dinner scene where Toni Collette has her, or Annie has her little outburst, and I can't forgive because you don't take responsibility for anything.
Yeah.
How did she not get an award? Oh my god,
that scene is
how did she not win anything?
Insane to me, dude. Could you imagine that conversation happening? Like, that is
again
crazy.
This whole thing feels so personal and so real. I like that you bring up the miniatures. I connect with that a lot, like just personally, because I paint miniatures and I like doing little building little structures and stuff for my little guys to run around, and so like I love that stuff just as a visual like part of the film. Like I instantly was like, oh, I'm all about this. Like. And the fact that it also has a narrative reason for being there makes it even better. I love the miniatures. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, but and I just love how we play with perspective because of those. So as Annie gets up and leaves, at the end of that, we have Peter sitting there, and then Steve just breaks down crying. That's just. It's so interesting there. And then how we also use the dollhouse for like history, of the family drama, like how the mother is trying to literally breastfeed Charlie, and there's a miniature of that.
I love that.
It's alluded to like in their dialogue, but to actually have it made, it's so weird.
Yeah.
Like who would make their?
I think the creepiest one is when she recreates the kind of the beheading scene.
That is crazy. It's just sitting there, and then like.
And Steve comes in. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "What if Peter saw that?" And she's like, "It's not about him." And I think that scene, along with like kind of the whole movie, but that scene really it spells out how separate she is from the rest of her family, and how she's going through the grieving process in a totally different way, and she's totally separate from them. I think the film really speaks to kind of her, like kind of how solitary she is during it. And that scene, it's like it's not about him. It's like this is obviously like you obviously can't do this as a parent. Like
that's fucked up.
It's so messed up. And the fact that she has such a disconnect from the rest of her family in that scene, I think is. And again, it's I love that the miniatures have they're a narrative tool. They're not just something interesting in your film because they look cool. I love that they play a role in it as well.
Yeah, and like I was saying, like with the camera angles, with the mindscape of the individual, and with just the fun of cool miniatures. You know, like just that element alone is also fun for a lot of people. So it works in 3 or 4 different ways depending on how you look at it.
You had a little background, isn't it? The studio that did a lot of the special effects, didn't they take on doing the miniatures as well?
Yeah, apparently the guy who was like the head guy in charge of special effects, that's how he got into Hollywood. It's like, oh, you need someone to do them, and that's basically my wheelhouse. I love doing those, and so like
you could do that, Connor. That could be you.
Yeah,
dude, I should go to Hollywood.
Yeah, but they were talking about like how like some of them got finished like the day before they were required to be on set.
That's so wild, man.
That's crazy.
I mean,
there's a lot of detail in those things. Like they are very, very good.
Yeah, and the reason like it had to be that way is because what they did is they sat down and then they went through all of their shot selections or their shot list and like tried to block everything out, and they were like, okay, I want this at 1/8 scale, and he was like, you do realize that means that the room of your model is going to be like 10 feet and your humans are going to be like 12 inches tall. And he's like, okay, so we don't want that.
the one aspect of Ari Aster that isn't an auteur, he should have just stuck to his guns. You're like, make it 10 feet.
Yeah, exactly. We got to build another house just for our miniature landscape. It's actually vivarium.
You talk about the shot list that he came up with. He came up with, it's a 75-page shot list that he gave the cinematographer prior to filming.
Yep.
Like that's how prepared this guy is. Like that's amazing.
That's actually fairly normal in terms of like there's a difference between coming up with all of your shot length and sticking with them, because some people are really good at making your shot list or your storyboard and be like, okay, this is exactly what I want. We're gonna go and do this. And a lot of filmmakers aren't great at that, and so they get on set and like, okay, we need to change things. So there's a little bit difference in terms of like a tour approach. Some people know that they don't do that, so that they don't do that well, so they'll have a looser idea of how they want to shoot things, and that's just, I think it's just the way that like some people make films and others aren't very good at it. So it's the shot thing, it's nice. It's just nice that like some people can actually achieve the vision that they have, that they've written down.
Yeah,
it's very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah, just 75 pages that seems like a lot. I and it shows how prepared he is. I think it is absolutely translated into the film. Do we want to move on to the score?
Yes, I'm sad I didn't see this in theaters.
Yeah, it would have been amazing, especially in a Dolby theater. Mm-hmm. It would have been fantastic.
Like, did you hear that low thumping noise?
Yeah.
It was meant to sound like it was coming from the other theater.
Really?
That was
how it feels. Yeah,
that's how Ari Aster described what the sound he wanted to feel, because like what it's meant to do is it's a tactile noise. Like you feel it in your gut. Like it drives the unease in a really subtle and subconscious way, but it reflects the tragedy of the Grahams being stalked by the Coven. Like it's coming. It's this unseen force that's making me uncomfortable and kind of sick to my stomach. But we're so focused on what's in front of us, we don't notice it. We just have that sense, and I think it's so cool.
Yeah, just like there's a threat out there, we don't know what it is, but it's coming, and this family's in danger. We have no idea what's going on almost.
Yeah.
And like you just slowly piece it together, and the score just really represents that throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
Colin Stetson is he did the score for this, and just go ahead and look him up real quick. His like the first image that pops up on Google is him just jamming on a saxophone. It looks great. He's got like a tank top on, just absolutely getting it. And then like you see that picture, and then to hear the score he came up with, like you would not associate. Like you see this guy, you'd be like, how did he come up with that? I think it's amazing.
Yeah, because he's like an avant-garde like saxophone player. Yeah, he records saxophone tracks for like a lot of big bands. Like I think Arcade Fire is one of them too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, you're on his Wikipedia page, aren't you?
No, I just have it on Google. I just keep
copy
looking at
save that. Like, that's your desktop.
I've just been looking at his picture this whole time. I'm barely a part of the podcast. I'm just looking at Colin Stetson. One of the kind of the only direction that Ari Aster gave him on the score, he's like, just make it evil. That was like his whole direction. Yeah. That's all, like kind of all the prompt he was given. And I guess he like went out into the woods, like closed his eyes, like blindfolded. He just like wanted to hear nature, and you know, that's like kind of was the inspiration for the score, which I think is really interesting. I think it shows up, and I think you get a lot of cool nature shots. You see them; their house is like surrounded by woods. I mean, I think it's
so cool.
The score lends itself to that. You know, they're not in a city, so I think the sound makes more sense for kind of the area they're in. I love how, again, I think like this film does a lot of like seclusion, and so the fact that they're kind of, it seems like they're in a house in the middle of nowhere, you know, surrounded by the woods. I love the feel of it. I think the score really enhances what you're seeing on screen, and I love that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's weird that it's not melodic, but it still is so unique, you know?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't stick with me in terms of its melodic structure. It doesn't get catchy, but it's like those noises get stuck in your head.
Yeah.
They're very original.
I think it seems like a lot of the stuff we've been watching lately, it doesn't have like a theme that you latch onto and you hear it like recur throughout the film. I think this has a lot of just like kind of bits and pieces that fit. They're almost like tailor-made for each scene, it feels like. And so I like that a lot. It's not just like a, you know, I think you watch like a Star Wars movie and you're like, oh, I recognize this, or Indiana Jones or something like that. You know, you latch on to some kind of some tone or rhythm that you're used to. This film doesn't even give you that. There's no comfort in even the score because it seems to kind of change based on like what you're seeing, and I think it's great.
So yeah, and here the score is very much a part of the movie, which is, you know, I'm a big fan of that. It's not outside the movie, it's not distracting, it's just part of it, and it's part of the story, and it helps the story build and helps you become more involved in the film.
You said that one of our earlier podcasts we did Lamb, and you said you thought that might be your favorite score?
Yeah.
Is this like rank up near it? Or?
This and Midsommar are both very, very close, but no, I think Lamb is still top of the line.
I just wonder, like, what you always talk about how much you like these scores and these like slow scores, these minimalist scores. I just feel like you got to be at work just like listening to the Hereditary soundtrack.
So I did. I put on a couple weeks ago. I had Midsommar and Hereditary just both playing back to back when I was working in my desk.
I started listening to the Midsommar one too.
And then my boss came back and he was like, "What the fuck is going on back here?" He's like, "Why are you listening to this shit?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. I'm just in the mood for it." And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like cleaning up the back area and stuff, and
I just bet you're like, your Spotify history must just be wild.
It's all just tones.
I think it's so funny that you latch onto those more than like the big bombastic scores you hear in like a Marvel movie or something like that.
Yeah, which is like, I mean, like obviously like I love Marvel movies and stuff like that, but like there's the Avengers theme song and there's like Star Wars theme song and all that stuff, and like they're iconic and all that stuff, but it's not part of the movie. It's just another product that they're marketing, and that's all that is.
Yeah.
This is nothing. This is not a product. They're not marketing shit. They're just making art, and this is part of the art form. It's like if a painting could also play music, like that's what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah. Or if a book had pictures.
Yeah. Which they sometimes do.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of novels don't. Yeah. Like the higher levels of literature.
Hungry Caterpillar, man. It's a banger.
Again, I think you gotta get ready for, you know, coming to a gallery near you, downtown Denver, Jaden's exhibit, where it's just all these like stills of these films we've been watching with just the score playing. I'm excited for you to open up the gallery and put that one out. I think it'd be amazing.
I can't wait. I mean, you know enough people that you could certainly call in a few favors.
Yeah.
Do we want to move into some of the characters now?
Yeah. Let's move into the characters. I think I like Annie.
Yeah. I think we've gone on enough about how, I mean, not enough. We've established that we like her a lot. She's not only I think we've talked more about Toni Collette and how much we like her, but I think the character Annie is awesome. Like it's interesting, and like her, like I said, like her kind of how she's apart from everyone else. And I like to think of this movie a lot as how different people deal with grief.
Yeah,
and you know, obviously following the death of Charlie is kind of the impetus for all that, and like she's we talked about like her writhing on the ground, just like crying, and that scene feels so real to me. She's like, I want to be dead. Like, this hurts too much. I want to be dead.
Yeah.
And nothing about that seems melodramatic.
No, it seems real as hell. Like, it's
which is interesting because Ari Aster has said, he's like, I like melodramatic stuff. He's like, I like that, but that feels so real. Like,
Yeah, it
that's
does.
like the loss of your child. Like, that's like the best, besides actually seeing a mother in the most painful situation ever, which I don't actually want to experience that. I'm fine with just put it on film.
Yeah.
Way I don't actually have to see it, but as close, that's got to be as accurate as you can get, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we saw it in Lamb too, with
Yeah.
the mother sheep bleeding for its baby.
yeah.
Oh yeah, same thing.
And if that
Tony
if that,
Collette and that sheep, they should have won awards.
I was about to say, if that sheep is not nominated this year, then what are we even doing, Academy?
Yeah.
I mean,
Same performance.
one thing about Toni Collette is like with me, like I feel very empathetic towards the character because she like physically looks like my mom. And
Oh, a
it's-
little bit. You're kinda
it's
right,
like,
man.
and it's just like the whole movie. I'm like, man, this is like looking at like it's like obviously it's not my mom, but like I feel this like empathy towards just like looking at my mom like going through this, like this terrible fucking time, and then like it's the son who like almost did it to her, even though it's not. Like,
Right.
And then I just feel guilt and like I feel all this like weird feelings. Like that scene at the dinner table like made me feel like a piece of shit person.
Right.
Almost. Yeah.
It's like
and
I
it
didn't
was-
even do anything wrong.
Right. And I was just like, I feel
bad.
like terrible. Like
Yeah.
I feel so bad for her, and it just her acting is phenomenal in this.
I think that'd be interesting to our moms should all watch this. And ask them what they think.
I'm almost positive I could never convince my mother
Yeah.
to watch this.
No, probably not.
Because I think we all look at this as the perspective of a son. You know, none of us have kids, so we
Yeah.
can't look at it at Steve's perspective, and so you kind of have to take on that lens. So I wonder how many moms watch this and we're like, that probably feels accurate.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because I try to put myself in all of the characters. I feel like Annie's pain more than I do any of the other ones. I don't really think of the person I necessarily like relate to physically as the one where I deposit my experience into. You know what I mean? So
I guess
the same
maybe
way like I love Midsommar so much, like I resonate so much with Danny.
Yeah.
And
Massive. We'll talk about that.
yeah, we'll talk
next
about
episode.
that a lot, but it has nothing to do with her gender or anything like that.
Nothing. Yeah.
I guess I maybe worded that wrong. I don't mean that I identify with Peter in this situation. What I mean is like the only way I can look at this film is as like a son or a brother to Charlie.
Because that's the only
like a
relationship you
son
two
to-
have. Like,
Yeah,
this-
so like I can't look at this as from the perspective of a father. I mean, I understand what you mean. With like, I'm not saying I identify with Peter. Like, oh, like I latch onto his emotion, and that's who I'm following through this. I'm just saying, like, just from the outside, I have no idea how a mother feels going through this kind of thing. So I can't like have that perspective like
Well,
genuinely.
And that's what I mean. Like that's why I think film is such a great medium, is because you can experience these things in a lesser version. Like obviously this isn't real life, so it's not exactly how things would go. These aren't necessarily real emotions, but when you put yourself into another person's shoes, you start to have this sense of empathy and compassion that you're not going to find in normal life, and you can start to get in other people's minds and think more outside of yourself. So they're exercises, I think, in empathy in movies
Yeah.
like this especially.
That's what I'm saying. Is like,
Yeah, no, I agree with
like
that.
My empathy, my empathic nature is like telling me like I need to feel fucking sorry for her. That I need to like, how do I fix this? How do I care for this character? Like, how do I get her out of this awful mind state? And she's in so much pain. And like, I'm feeling that pain from her.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. And like that's it's. I think it is easier for me to represent like that feeling as like a more of like a son, or you know, not necessarily her, but being empathetic for that character from a different perspective. I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I like again kind of how she's dealing with grief, and then like kind of her isolation. She keeps kind of moving further and further away. That's when she goes to like that grief counseling. She is introduced to Joan, and I think that's kind of furthers her separation from the family. And
Because it's all predicated on a lie too.
right,
Yep.
yeah, there's so much manipulation and like that, like the cult, like you guys say, it's
Well, no,
it's
not
in
the cult, but that the where she was going. Like
Yeah.
she was going to the movies.
Oh, right.
So it's
okay.
predicated on a lie. Like again, I can't. I don't know why you wouldn't say that you can talk about this. You know?
Yeah, the
Like,
fact that she has to
it's
hide
very-
it. Yeah,
Yeah, it seems very honest and real. Like I don't think that. I mean, her husband is a psychologist, psychiatrist. I don't remember which. Clearly, he is understanding of those types of grief expressions.
I think
don't
that's
know,
probably why she did it.
He
It's 'cause
says
she
that.
didn't because she didn't want his help. She didn't want him to know everything that she's going through. Probably because she feels some kind of guilt because she feels anger and resentment towards her son in this moment, and she
Well,
doesn't want
this
that
was, like,
represented through her family.
even the first one though. She goes because of before Charlie died.
Yeah.
and so that's what I mean. It's like why.
That's fair.
Yeah, why wouldn't you be like, I'm gonna go do a grief counseling thing real quick, Steve? Like, because it's not. I just have so much baggage with my mother in general. I think that might be good. But she says I'm gonna go see a movie.
Yeah, you bring that up and how understanding he is. He says that at like the beginning of the movie because you're kind of following the funeral of her mother, and then they get back home and she's like, I don't really feel bad. Should I feel worse? Like, what's happening? He's like, you're feeling whatever you need to feel right now. He's like, whatever happens, it'll come with time. And he's like, he's very understanding about it. So yeah, why does she lie about it? It is odd.
It is very
Yeah.
weird. Yeah.
But that scene, like her at the grief counseling circle, that's such an amazing monologue.
Oh yeah, going on about kind of her family history, and I think a lot of the stuff in that monologue sets up things for later in the film. Like she talks about her brother and how he committed suicide, and he felt like his mom was putting something into him, and that's what drove him to it. And that plays out later in the film.
Yeah.
I think. But it's just even without kind of that, like I said, without the paranormal element introduced into that scene at all,
It's still a very
it's
good
still
scene.
so good.
Yeah.
Like it just, and I love when the camera then kind of flips around to the support group, and they're like, "What the hell is going on?" Like that's kind of she just unloaded all this baggage right there. Their reaction, I think, is great.
Yeah, I love the way it's shot. Like a lot of times we shoot people in a circle over the shoulder, so it's everyone's perspective within the group. But how we have it set up here is it's so far back, and it's everybody in the circle centered in the frame, and at the middle of it is Annie. So everyone's eyes and attitudes, and you can actually see Joan off to the right in the first shot. I think there was one other cult member or coven member that I noticed, and it was the old guy with the white beard.
Yeah.
I didn't notice any other ones there. They definitely tried to stay away from the obvious ones they had introduced, like the man looking at Charlie at the funeral, the woman waving to her at the playground. But I think of that as like it's like a collection of all of these people. Maybe mourning Ellen, or communing in terms of like conjuring. But and that's why I find that setup so interesting, is because it's very different than how we normally shoot these things. But then as it just sucks you in on her perspective and everybody looking at her, it almost gets like a sinister sense.
Yeah. I know we have some scenes we want to talk about. We're kind of already on this one, so let's wrap up kind of what we think of this scene. You think that it's kind of them mourning the
matriarch.
Yeah, like she's gone now. I like to think of the that kind of grief support group as like the cult being like predatory. Like they are latching onto people in their weakest moment, and then Joan comes later and she's like, oh, just say these words and you'll get the person you love back. And I think that is like, that's what I think the kind of that grief group is. I think it is the cult like going after people in their weakest moment.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily think of it as like mourning or anything like that. Like they're all together kind of mourning the same person. Mm-hmm. You just don't know it. I like that idea a lot, but that's what I thought. I was like, oh, this is like so gross. Like coming after people in their worst moment,
Yeah. And so I guess, and then we should probably talk about Steve,
Yeah. There's not much to him, man.
He's in the movie, I guess.
He cries a couple times, and those are really powerful.
He's obviously the most sane person in the film.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I think each character is supposed to be a representation of how people deal with grief differently. And I like to think of you have some people who are more stoic when something tragic happens, and the way they deal with grief is to support the people around them.
Yeah.
Problem solvers.
Yeah, and so it's like Annie's losing it. She's crying on the ground, and he's just there to hold her. And I feel like maybe it's not shown in the film, but my assumption is like he's probably taking care of a lot of the stuff around the house. He handles like some phone calls earlier in the film,
which we'll get into.
Yeah, it's like his way of dealing with grief is to try and make things as easy as he can for the people around him, and that's kind of what I think. That's why he's in the film, is to kind of represent that way of handling grief. And so while I don't think he's in the movie very much, I think he still represents something that matters. And so I like that he's in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he creates the amount of tension too of like otherwise it's just Annie going crazy.
Yeah.
And it's just Peter being a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it something? Isn't he like 23 years older than Toni Collette?
Yeah. He would have been the actor's age would have been 55 when he had Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Gabriel Byrne. Yeah, he's so much older, but it doesn't feel weird in the movie at all. Like I didn't, it didn't like stick out to me. I was like, yeah, okay.
Oh, it stuck out to me. Like he's very old. He's very much older than Toni Collette. It's not even the fact that the problem I have there being an age gap in their relationship is the fact that he's 55 having a child. That just seems ridiculous to me.
It seems fine to me. Have kids whenever you want.
Yeah, it just never struck me as like, it's just in them. It's not a big deal to me. I like the character enough, and
he's a good-looking dude, so he could pass for maybe 50.
Yeah,
I he's probably portraying a younger dude than what he actually is.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about Peter next?
Yeah, let's talk about how Ari Aster just told him, hey, for 97% of this movie, you're just going to stand there. And that's it. That's all you're going to
do. He doesn't do a ton, but I think the scenes he's in, he's used effectively.
Yeah, I mean, he is used. I think it works well for the movie, what he's doing. But yeah, he does not do a lot. There's a lot of standing there, literally making no emotion on his face.
Which is good because he's a terrible crier, and not like a terrible crier like ugly face, like, wow,
he's bad at crying.
Yeah, because he was like, I was like, dude, like a demon just threw something at the glass cabinet, and you're like, oh, I'm scared.
Or like he has that dream where his mom's choking him, and he wakes up. He's like, Mom, you were choking me. It's like I acted literally just as well as he did in that. Yeah, he's not a good crier, but I think a lot of the stuff. Like we talked about, kind of his slow turns where it's like something scary behind him. He emotes like kind of the scary parts of the movie well enough that I don't have a problem with him as an actor in this. So it's Alex Wolff who plays him. And this is, I think it's kind of pretentious, and it kind of annoys me when actors do this. He was like, I'm going like full character actor for this, like method acting for this. And so he wanted everyone to call him Peter on set, and that's how everyone referred to him. And after like his last scene, he then introduced himself to everyone as Alex. I just think it's like you played kind of a smaller role in this film. Like this is Toni Collette's movie. If she wants to be a method actor in this, then go for it. But it's like you're just kind of the kid in this. Like I kind of think it's weird when people do that. It's like
I guess it depends on the type of role.
I just don't think this warranted that at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Another thing that he did, when he slams his face on the desk.
Yeah.
He told Ari Aster, he's like, because again, he's going all method actor. He's like, I want to break my nose. He's like, I'm going to break my own nose. He's like, use a real desk. Ari Aster's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, but kind of the crazy thing that happens. So they have like a foam pad on the desk, and then he slams his face on it, but it's still like a hard desk under that. He hit his head hard enough that he actually like dislocated his jaw, which is an injury it had before apparently. Yeah. So the fact that he kind of, I don't know if it cuts and there's any time between that, but he hits his face and then he gets off the desk. I wonder if his jaw is like dislocated during that scene.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
No, yeah, it does cut.
Yeah, okay.
It shows him like scampering away.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if there was a cut there or not, but yeah, it'd be kind of crazy if he was doing that with his jaw all messed up. But yeah, I guess he kind of got what he wanted.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I like the stuff he's in. I think there's a good bit of dialogue between him and Annie where he's talking about going to the party. She's like, oh, are you going to drink? He's like, we're not even old enough to drink. But then he goes and smokes weed there. It's like, everyone knows you're lying. Like, just because you're a kid doesn't mean you can't get booze, doesn't mean you can't get drugs. And,
right.
And then when his sister's going to go with, he's like, okay, no drinking. He's like, I already said I wasn't going to. It's like, you're lying, kid. We all know that you're going to use some substance there.
Pretty awful parenting in that moment, too.
You think so?
Yeah, go ahead and take your 13-year-old weird sister to a high school party.
Yeah, because she clearly knew it wasn't a school function.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that I think kind of the setup for that is a little weird. But it's all just to drive you to get to like that.
That is like literally like my one problem with the movie is that entire setup and scene. So
I also think of it though as like it's kind of like a control thing, you know, between her and Peter. Like not only is Charlie kind of an annoyance to her, but also this will keep Peter in line. And that's why I think
kind of get that. It's like you can't act out at this party. You know, you can't go and get drunk and
if you're gonna
be
lie
wild.
to me, then you also have more responsibility. As well.
I kind of okay. That's a take on it I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah.
I like that.
Just like I think as like an intelligent person, you don't give your teenager responsibility over your other child going to a party. That's just
I like common sense. Like obviously. Yeah. And I wonder, and it's very clear that she's projecting on Peter that like she's not gonna take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
Like that's, I'm sure that's 100% something that she feels, but she's never gonna say it because it's someone else's fault.
Yep.
So we're talking about Charlie. Do we want to move on to her?
Yeah,
That's Millie Shapiro. It's actually kind of funny. Her and Alex Wolff, they went to like the same kind of school for arts together, so they knew each other prior to that. Ari Aster also, he like encouraged them to kind of go out in character and do things together. So they went out and had lunch, I guess, and so for like an hour and a half, basically like they were in character, and Millie Shapiro just doesn't say anything because she's just kind of a weird little kid, and so Alex Wolff is like out to lunch with someone, and he's like trying to talk and have a conversation, and she's just there probably making clicking noises the whole time.
I really hope that's hilarious.
She's like, "Can I get that chicken?" She's like cutting off the fucking body pieces and making dolls.
She has like the kids safe scissors, and she's cutting up her chicken tenders.
They also the hoodie that she wears, you see her in like the very beginning when she's in the treehouse. That hoodie, like her and Alex Wolff went out and like he was like, go like you're going shopping with her, like figure out what she wants to wear. So he actually picked out the hoodie for her, and that's like what ends up in the film. That's why it's like so oversized and so weird.
Yeah.
Because it's like he's like, I'm trying to figure out what she should wear, but he's like a kid trying to figure out something else for another kid. So I think I guess I like knock the method acting, but I think it kind of works for that kind of stuff. I think that's interesting, and it builds kind of the awkward weirdness between them, knowing that there was even like more background in it. Like they feel like brother and sister who aren't like really connected. Yeah. And I think the age gap helps with that. Like it makes it kind of land more realistically to me. Mm-hmm. I think more stuff about Charlie. I like the Annie's does the miniatures, and then she does her own kind of distorted version of miniatures. And I like to think of that as Annie talks about how her mom got her hooks in early on Charlie. And like, so that's kind of why maybe she does kind of a grosser version of the miniatures. It's like, yeah, it's still Annie's daughter, but it's she's doing something, but like kind of wrong, you know?
I mean, I do not think that's why she's making them at all, but yeah.
I think she makes them because of
it's the demon inside of her body.
Well, I think of it's a hereditary thing. Annie actually says that she was a tomboy growing up, didn't like dolls, didn't like dresses, didn't like pink. I think it's ironic that she actually ends up being a miniaturist for someone that didn't like dolls.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected in Charlie, only because I think the same thing has affected Annie.
Yeah.
That she has like a piece of like payment in her as well.
I don't know about all that, but I don't even think that that Charlie is like really necessarily a person.
Oh, I don't think so either.
She's just a vessel for the demon, and like she gets turned into one of her dolls at the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which
I love that. There's the setup of like the two little dolls bowing, and then you have the
on Jones.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yep. Yeah, that is so great.
Another thing I really like about just the Charlie character, and I think a lot of movie trailers ruin movies. I love the trailer for this. I don't know if you guys remember it at all. Charlie is like heavy in the trailer, and so it makes you think that like, oh, what an important character, and not that she's not important, but you think that she's gonna be in the film the whole time, and then when she's killed like 30, 40 minutes in, and you still have like at least another hour 10 to go in the film, and so it's like, I loved this is a film where I got the shock value of that, because I was like, oh my god, she can't really be dead, because I'm set up to believe that she's gonna play a big role after this. Yeah. It's like she can't really, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, she's really there, and you see her head on the ground. I was like, oh my god, like I this is a movie you talk about it being hard to get through. Like that part, I was like, oh my god, like this is really happening, and I have to watch this now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And speaking of really happening, it really happened. In 2004, there was two friends, 21-year-old John Hutcherson and his friend, 23-year-old Francis Brome, were on their way back home from a night out, and both of them were drunk. Hutcherson was driving while Brome was hanging out of the passenger window. He drove off the road and sideswiped a telephone pole, decapitating Brome. And Hutcherson, apparently he said he was unaware of what happened to it, but others claimed that he looked remorseful when the police found him sleeping at his home. Like, he kept driving all the way home, parked in the driveway, and went to bed. And the next morning, a neighbor was walking by and saw Brome's corpse in the truck.
Oh my God.
That's fucking crazy.
It's just everything they shot was like, and I think that's why it feels so real. Is like, okay, here's something that actually happened. How do we visually represent that happening and make it believable? It feels absolutely believable. Like, man, I can actually, and then to find out it did happen.
Yeah, this is a real thing. Oh my
even
God.
worse. Like, I think it's even worse than someone doing it wrong. And in terms of like shooting it and being like, man, that's kind of a crazy setup, but good thing that's not real.
Yeah, no, it makes it so much worse knowing there's a, like, I don't know if it's inspiration behind the scene, but knowing that this is a real thing. Oh, that makes
disgusting.
Yeah. Thanks for that fact, Calvin. That was great.
Yeah. I'm all about fun facts.
Yeah, I'd call that fun.
Okay, speaking of fun facts, I like to go through the IMDb pages and kind of look at some of the trivia that comes up in these. And usually sometimes there's some pretty good stuff on there, and then sometimes there's other really annoying things where it's like, if you look at the poll, like following the beheading scene, you may notice like the Coven's symbol put on the telephone pole. And I was like, yeah, duh, it's in the middle of the frame, and you linger on it. I know.
For like 10 seconds.
Yeah, and it's almost like you could put a fun fact like, if you look closely, you may notice Toni Collette is an actress in this film. It's like, yeah, I know. Like it's that same kind of thing. It's like, what a dumb fun fact.
Apparently, people miss it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I've talked to quite a few people. And not a whole lot of people notice it.
That's so interesting.
Like Pete, my buddy Pete at work, he's a big fan of this movie and all of the A24 stuff. He said he noticed like his third or fourth time watching the movie.
I don't consider myself a very smart man, but it's right in the middle of the frame. Like I saw it, I definitely caught it.
I still know if like people are looking for that is the thing. Yeah.
I guess maybe the first time I watched it, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't maybe associate it with the cult immediately, but like I was like, that means something. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same symbol that's on Annie's necklace that you see when she's giving the eulogy as well, too, though.
So we've been talking about the beheading scene. I kind of like, we kind of talked about not liking the setup for that. I think one thing that Ari Aster does, not as much in this movie, and I'll kind of harp on it more when we do our review of Midsommar. I think there's some stuff he does that's like so obvious, and it's kind of just to let the audience know, like, hey, remember this thing, like, or I need to take time to remind you or show you what's going on because you might not get it. They're at the party and it's the kids chopping up nuts.
It's the most annoying scene.
What kind of kids are just like, better get the almonds out and chop these up? Like,
They were not even almonds. Almonds are gas.
They were walnuts.
Walnuts suck.
Whatever. I don't care.
And like, are you putting all of those nuts into one
It's
cake?
so many.
What is going on?
Yeah, how many cakes are you making?
Yeah, dude.
It's like-
what is happening?
You've already set up that Charlie has the nut allergy, and then he just spends forever showing teens chopping up nuts, which, that's what I go to a party to do as a kid. Like, I better make a
What
cake.
high school party even has food?
Yeah, or people, or I mean, like, especially people making food.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
not
want
happening.
food made by a high schooler.
No.
I hate the setup for that. I just
And what
hate
high school kid wants walnuts in their cake? Nobody.
Yeah.
like that part feels, for a movie that I think is nearly flawless, is in terms of like a filmmaker like really just putting out something that is like so tightly made. That's the one scene I'm just like, what the fuck were you thinking when you put this in? Like, everything else has been flawless. Why would you have a giant nut chopping scene? And I get it. It sets up like the her needing to go to the hospital, and it sets up the whole beheading scene. I just think, like, you've been so clever so far, and you're so clever the rest of your movie. How did you have such a dumb way to get you to the beheading scene, which is like a pivotal moment in the film?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's my one knock against Ari Aster in this movie. I was like,
So I was reading this one article, and there's like a fan theory about how the grandma gave her the nut allergy by breastfeeding her, which I just don't understand how someone came to that conclusion.
I don't get that
I don't
either.
get that at all.
How's that a possibility thing?
Because it's hereditary.
Yeah. I don't get it.
That's
Gosh.
dumb.
But no one else.
That's actually how Ellen died. Like, she ate too many walnuts.
I don't like that at all.
No, yeah, I was like, no one else even has a nut. Like, it doesn't say that the grandma has a nut allergy, and she can somehow transfer that through breast milk. Like,
Yeah.
no, it was weird.
That's
yeah.
a really deep take. That
Yeah, just really reaching there.
Whoever came up with that take it's bad, and you should feel bad. That's terrible. So we've talked about, I think we had a couple scenes we wanted to go over. Talked about kind of the grief counseling scene, the beheading, and then I think the other like most important is like just kind of the end sequence. It's
amazing.
It's closing out the movie in the most fantastic way. It hits like all these great notes. I think for For me,
Like, I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Yeah.
I think about it. Like, I'm getting chills. It's frightening.
Yeah, wordless, breathless, viscerally upsetting, and just like uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's all of those things at once.
Yeah, so I think that sequence starts with Peter coming downstairs and he's found the charred remains of his father. And like we kind of mentioned earlier, that's when you see Annie's up in the corner, kind of out of focus. And then...
Well, she's up in the corner when he first wakes up. That's what I noticed.
Both of them, yeah.
Yeah.
In his room, and then also when she's in the family room.
The way she moves around on the walls, too, is so fucking
creepy.
Yeah, it's so great.
But we talk about kind of the slow turns that Peter does, and this is probably my favorite shot in the whole movie. Is he's turned around, and you've seen Toni Collette's character up in the corner, and so I think the assumption is he's going to turn it around. The camera's going to go up to her. He's going to freak out, and then he's going to run away or whatever.
No, but there's a naked dude in the fucking doorway.
Oh my god, it is so frightening, and
Yeah.
I think part of what makes it so scary is we've been conditioned to assume there's going to be some jump scare when he turns around, and the fact that it's just a guy there, and it's not his mom that's like crawled down from the ceiling to chase him. It's just a guy, and it just holds on that for so long, and it's so uncomfortable.
It is.
And it's you start to see more and more of like the cult members creeping into the house, and then it ends up with them in the treehouse. But I just think I just love that scene so much. Like, and it just takes so long, and that's why I love this movie so much. Like, let your shot breathe, man. Like, that scene is so much creepier because of how long you just see this guy in the doorway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do too. Like, I love the transition from Steve gets set on fire, and then we go to the exterior shot of the house, and it's day, and then we jump cut to night, and all of the coven is out on the yard, and they're all naked.
Yeah. It's super weird.
It's like, it's not even a jump scare, but it's just like, oh, this is unsettling. I've scared myself again.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
And then he turns back around, and this is another like kind of jump scare, but it's like Toni Collette's in the corner. Or I keep saying Toni Collette because she's just so great. I can't not refer. Annie's in the corner, and it's really dark, and you see her bust out of it, and then that's when like the chase takes place, and Peter gets up in the attic.
Oh my God! Speaking of getting up in the attic, that scene where she's just bashing her head.
On the attic door.
That is terrifying.
That's what I'm saying. This whole
like,
sequence is it's got you gripped, man. I'm just like, oh my God, I cannot not watch this.
And he walks up in there, and before we had noticed, like, because Steve and Annie had both gone up and found her mother's body up there headless.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then you go up there and it's not there anymore. And you're like, what is happening now? Because like I expected like he's gonna freak out because he's gonna see his grandma's headless body.
Yeah.
And it's not there. And all of a sudden, once again, there's naked people in the background.
Yeah.
There's actually multiple.
Yeah, so there's a bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's the 3 that he sees, but there's another one actually hiding behind.
Yeah, it's like it's like in the corner. Yeah.
But I love how we're so drawn up in how uncomfortable this is, like how scared we are, and when she's actually banging on the door or the whatever
the access hole to the attic.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's a normal horror movie trope, like thinking of like The Shining, like pounding on the door, and it's not until you actually cut there and you realize, oh, how is she actually getting tall enough to knock on it?
She's
and
just
then, like,
floating on it, just bashing her face.
and
Like
her head. Oh my god.
that scene is insane. Like that's an insane thing to do. Like and that's crazy. And then he's just.
I knew I wanted to talk about this movie, but it feels like we can't even be like super coherent going through it because I'm like reliving the scene right now.
Yeah,
It's so visceral
chilling.
and there's so much going on. That's like all I can do is be like, go see this movie because we're not even going to do this end sequence justice. You have to just see it. It's so good. And then I think the sound design in that scene is awesome as well.
Don't do that motion when you.
Yeah, you're like moving your fist back and forth,
flossing your teeth, but it's not. She's flossing her neck.
Flossing your spine.
She goes through the back of her head. Like it's just. Like I was sitting there with my buddy Blake and me. We're watching the scene, and he's not like a super huge movie guy, or definitely not a huge horror movie guy. And he's like, "What?" He's like, "What is happening right now?" And he starts freaking out. He's like, "Is she cutting off her own fucking head?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty sure." He's like, "She needs to go faster," and then she just starts going faster. And I was like, "This is fucking gruesome and terrifying."
It's brutal.
Yeah.
And then we can move on to he jumps out the window. He ends up in the treehouse, and I like what you said a lot, Calvin. It's like the movie starts out with a shot on the treehouse, and that's where it all ends. And I love just like that. completing the circle, kind of like the continuity within the film. I think it works out so well.
Yeah, and especially with regard to windows, because windows are a big part of how he composes shots, especially with the treehouse in it. So the fact that he leaps out of a window is, I think, kind of like breaking out of the dollhouse.
Does he die when he does that?
He's at least knocked unconscious enough to the point where he is weak enough to be overtaken by Payman.
Okay, because one thing I don't like about this movie is the blue light thing that
I love
represents
that.
the demon. I think it was a little cheesy, and I don't think I needed it.
I think it was just enough visual representation to see something, but without being overdone. I love too that it's just, it's probably CGI, but it also feels like a car passing, or they're just playing with lens and the light. I think that's kind of fun.
I think it's unnecessary. I think it's I don't think you need it in the movie,
especially when you think of like how those images are represented. Like, have you ever done like an aura photo or seen an aura photo?
Mm-mm.
There's these things called aura cameras, which are just, it's just a special type of film that what it does is it's meant to represent your aura, like how it gets exposed. It's like pink or it's like blue, and it reflects who you are, and like it's basically an astrology photograph.
Yeah,
they're kind of cheesy, kind of goofy, because they're like, yeah, there was only ever 100 made. It's like, that's not how cameras work. So it's like that. So that's why it's represented like that. It's more of a mystical thing.
Yeah, that didn't throw me off at all. I just think everything in this movie fits so well. It's so planned out. Everything totally makes sense to me. I don't think we forgot to mention this is a two-parter. We kind of want to wrap this one up now. We usually like to go through kind of the nuts and bolts of these movies first, and
everything you're seeing on frame, the first layer.
Yeah, we definitely went through the nuts, so we won't talk about those no more.
Yeah, I think we'll dive deeper into some of the subtext and
get to the bolts.
Yeah. So so thank you for listening.
Check, all that stuff,
Thank you for joining us for part 1. I hope you guys catch part 2. With that, I'm your host Connor. I have my co-host Jaden and former guest Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.